Hi, Jude.
Hi, Alessio.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back,
Yes,
listeners and viewers.
yes. So, today we are going to talk about the self.
hmm
And as I mentioned to you just a minute before we hit the record button, I've got parts that fear getting it wrong. And you wisely reminded me that there obviously is a right, wrong way of doing this, isn't there?
Exactly.
Right?
There is only one answer.
So, in the spirit of getting it wrong, let's start this
Yeah.
podcast episode. So,
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
so if this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast, this is Alessio. I am an IFS trainer, use he, they pronouns. Jude, do you want to say something about you before we get
Yeah.
started?
Hello, I'm Jude. I'm an IFS psychotherapist and clinical consultant and supervisor. And I use she, they pronouns.
Beautiful. So, this is another topic that came out of our conversation from the work we did for the Neuroqueering IFS conference workshop when was it? October 2024?
October 24, yeah.
And it's about a lot of people I know and myself and you, we kind of been questioning the self and questioning its part of queering. So it's a big topic here. And today we want to give you an introduction to this topic because I personally I'm the one who's kind of pushing this agenda. I personally think that it's such a big topic that it deserves, if not 2, even 3 episodes. So my idea would just be to exchange some ideas with you, Jude, now for this intro to the topic.
Yeah.
Even to kind of explain why we're doing this, and obviously for relief to my parts that want to get it right or wrong.
Yeah, let's help those ones.
Thank you. Yeah, because the idea would be to do an intro and then one on self and neurodivergence. The title could be Is the Self or Can the Self be Neurodivergent? And then one on self and sexuality and one on self and gender, or maybe put them together. We will see. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And it is a very important topic a big one in IFS. And just to clarify around the joke about there is one way, what that joke is about is that actually there's a lot of different perspectives on what is self in IFS. What do we mean by self? What qualities does self or self energy, which I prefer, self energy have? Yeah. And so we're exploring this rather than coming in with a definition, I would say.
Thank you. My parts relax as they hear that.
We don't have to know everything.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I have parts that want to kind of say, well, by now you should know everything, Alessio, shouldn't you? So yeah. But yeah, I think if anything that we say here allows anybody who's listening to our words to start their own inquiry or get their curiosity juices going, I think that's something that everybody can really find something about themselves.
Yeah.
If we do this. And listening to you, the first thing that came to mind is how difficult I think the whole thing is to kind of try to get this absolute final definition of self, which
Mm.
obviously some parts of me want to have. Because if I remember what I got told one by some of my mentors, is that we're never fully unblended. So when we learn the idea of self, we learn, like, oh, this is the self, these are the qualities, this is self energy, and a lot of things, and the C's and the P's and all the other qualities, as if that self could ever exist on its own.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, what I've learned, and I kind of agree with from very, very senior teachers, is that we are always blended quite a lot. I mean, they say that 70 to 75% blending with parts is the maximum. So, which means that the maximum unblending we can get is 25%. So, all that we can really feel and appreciate and be aware of in terms of self is 25% of what it really is. Because if we unblend more, we can get into almost like a dissociative state in which we might be more in self somehow, or self energy, but we might not be aware of it. So then we won't really know.
It puts me in
That's
mind
where I'm
of
at with it.
yeah, and I've always found C. Sykes' continuum of self energy really helpful. That it's one end is we're all parts, one end is we're all self, but we exist somewhere along that line, and we move along that line through the day. Through the day we might be more or less blended, but we're never actually in that all self place.
Yes.
We're never completely self without parts, and actually. I'm really glad that we're starting here, because that's something that comes up with clients often, that sense of, oh well, I'm not in self. I haven't been in self because I'm aware of parts, and it can sometimes IFS can get learnt in that way, that's the goal, to be all self without parts. And some parts are quite attracted to that idea too. They're like, oh yeah, let's get rid of all the other ones.
Yes. Well, like I have parts that want to define self, right? Without any other parts. There is this idea.
Yeah. And actually, getting to that place of understanding, it's self and parts. Self two-part connection and self and parts in a system is really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of self-led.
Yes. And how much we can do with that 25% of unblending that we can get, so much healing can happen. And also to add to the mix that parts can have their own self and self energy, which I think might be too much for my brain for this episode. So we'll just park it there. Maybe we'll
but
no, we're not. Okay.
Well, yes, we're not. I think that's a really important point you're making, Alessio, because when we are two, here we go. Here's another binary. When we are two, parts or self, then we miss the qualities of the parts, and we also miss that many of our parts have a lot of self energy within them.
Yes.
And that self energy is essential and needed in our system. And we can often get here with this idea of self-like parts that are very close to self, but are parts, and often they can be quite as a supervisor and consultant, my supervisees can often struggle with those in their client systems, and so this self-like part's always here, doing the work. And but if we're always looking at that as only a problem, then we're missing that those parts can also be very helpful in a system, in helping us. I might be overcomplicating things here, I'm realizing halfway through this point, but those parts have a lot of self energy within them already, and they can be really helpful allies. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
When we're getting to know a system, and when we're like when we're too stuck in this, it's either self or parts, we can be too dismissive of the value and the qualities of parts and the self that they have within them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for naming the binary here, that there is always the risk of doing one or the other. There isn't really a definition, and we can find self and self energy within parts. So even if they are what we call blended, they can still hold their own self energy.
Yeah.
And some of them can be incredible resources, like self-like parts, who have managed and run the system quite successfully for many years. And as we discuss this, as we unpack it, I think I value more and more this kind of episode of introduction to the topic, also as a bridge to the topic, because as we explore the neuroqueering of IFS, we are exploring like uncharted territory to a certain extent, and I go back to the distinction between hardware and software. That can be quite binary in itself, right? We can say, well, that's the hardware and that's the software. But in reality, I don't think we can either ever make that clean cut as to what is what.
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
So, when it comes to neurodivergence and neurodiversity, we consider it mainly a hardware aspect. Yet then we have parts and self. They are never really a binary concept, and parts and self interact with the hardware, with the body, with the neurology. And that's also not a clear cut either. So it's helpful to think about it, because, of course, from a healing perspective, when we work with clients, or when you or I support our supervisees to help their clients or themselves, it's really about trying to make as much clarity as possible, and also to hold that there might not be that clear cut that some parts of ourselves would like to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's okay. And we can help the exploration and the queering of the whole discussion and concept.
Yeah, I agree.
Sense, Jude?
To me, yes.
Okay, good.
But yeah, it's sort of, we use things like the hardware software analogy, which is it's really helpful, but we can get things can get a bit sticky when we confuse the map with the terrain. So it's useful to have that distinction and recognize, yes, we have a neurology, a system, a hardwiring, the hardware, and then we have parts which we could see as hardware and software. But then if we hold on to that too tightly, if we say, well, this is, so if we confuse the map of, well, it might look like this, with the terrain of, well, it really is like this, then that can become, we can kind of trip ourselves up with that. So it's sort of like we have to hold it, we're holding what's helpful, but we're holding it lightly.
Yeah. Yes. I like this analogy of map and terrain. And, we are with our clients on the field, trying to explore it. And it can be very useful to have a map.
Yeah. It's great that we've come out with our tools. We've got our map, we've got our compass. We know roughly, we've been to places like this before, but we haven't been here before. Yeah.
And what I'm finding extremely helpful as I proceed with my development, which is never ending really, is that terrain and the map are both important and necessary, and sometimes we might impose a map on a terrain, losing track of what really is going on. And it's like, sometimes I make this example of someone comes for a psychological problem when it isn't. And like, for example, the heating is on in a room and I'm sweating. And then if, it is a physiological thing, you've just got to open a window, turn off the heating, or just take some clothes off. But if we don't see that, we start to think that it's somehow faulty psychological response. And we start digging in the past, and we might even find traumas and parts. But actually, you've got to open a window. So if we don't map the terrain correctly, somehow we might put a lot of effort into trying to solve a problem from a wrong perspective.
It's like when we lose our curiosity.
Yes. Or I want to say, even sometimes something more than curiosity is needed, especially in this field, because let's go back to what we discussed some time ago around neurodivergence not being a part. If collectively we keep on saying my dyslexic part, and then we don't ever question it in a self-led way, I would say, then that becomes the map, right? We've missed a piece of the territory because we haven't questioned it. Maybe no one has listened to our podcasts, because everybody should listen to our podcast.
How could they not?
Obviously, first thing in the morning. But so there is that curiosity that sometimes can have a different flavor. Sometimes one can be curious about, what makes you say that that's a part of you, right? Sometimes the curiosity can question some things that get almost undetected. It can fly. Is it under the radar, over the radar?
Either under or over the radar. Both work.
Okay, but that's my English not being great. I mean, which one is undetected? Under or over the radar?
Well, I think both would be, but I think under is what we commonly
the one we say it's undetected.
Sure.
Okay. Thank
but
you.
Both, if you had said either of those, they would have been right, I think.
Thank you.
Unless our listeners are all screaming now, going, no, it's one particular one. All of our listeners.
Right. Good.
And I've forgotten my point that I was about. So it's like leading with that curiosity, and more than curiosity, if someone's saying my dyslexic part, but also not saying, no, you've got the wrong map. So we're not going to then say, hang on a minute, parts are not the neurodivergence is in the system, client, you are wrong. We're going to say exactly what you just said, Alessio, of like, tell me more about this part and what's going on with them, and we would be leading with that interest. To allow the story to unfold rather than imposing upon it.
Right. So I think that's the metaphor that can guide us into the next episodes, when we're gonna explore and attempt to map self, remembering that what really matters is to empower and allow each other to explore the territory when it comes to self and the intersection with neurodiversity, with gender identities, with sexuality. And I want to name a topic that probably we're not going to touch, because we're both white people. We're not going to probably name much around race and what it means to live in a body that has a black skin, or that has another skin color, or comes from a specific culture. So this is such a wide
And maybe that's one for having a guest on at some point who is better placed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe as we approach the end of this episode, we can remind people how they can contact us. And one reason to contact us, on top of telling me off for the use of under the radar, over the radar, could be
please, everybody, rush to your emails and let us know.
My parts would like to get it right or wrong will love that. But yeah, one of the reasons to contact us is to propose that you come and speak to us, especially from differences that we do not represent.
Yeah, we can speak from our marginalized experiences, but we don't want to speak for experiences that are beyond our understanding or comprehension, and we would love to have voices on that could speak for that.
Because we'd like to be respectful and provide our exploration of our territories and our struggle with the mapping of it, which we'll do more of in terms of the intersection with neurodiversity, gender and sexuality. So how would they contact you, Jude?
Well, Alessio, they would contact me. You can email me at hello@anchoredinself.co.uk, or you can jump to my website, which is anchoredinself.co.uk. And how will they contact you, Alessio?
Well, the best way to contact me is through my website, therapywithalessio.com, where people can find all sorts of things. But if they want to contact me, there should be a contact form on the homepage that they can fill in. And
you can find us.
You can find us.
You can find us.
Yeah, probably we are in many WhatsApp groups together as well.
Okay, so are we going to pause our intro to self there?
Yes.
Yeah, great. And then next time we'll be back with a deeper dive into one of these avenues of self.
Yeah, more to come.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.